The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble corridors of Buckingham Palace as Camilla, Queen Consort, made her way to the Royal Registry office. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the polished floor, echoing through the vast hallways adorned with portraits of monarchs past. Today was different from her usual ceremonial duties. Today, she carried with her a decision that would send shockwaves through the royal family and beyond. Princess Charis had been a beloved figure in the royal household for over a decade. Born into a minor noble family, she had caught the attention of the palace through her charitable work and unwavering dedication to various causes. Her marriage into the extended royal family had been celebrated across the Commonwealth, with thousands of well-wishers lining the streets of London during her wedding procession. She possessed a natural grace that reminded many of the late Princess Diana, and her genuine compassion for others had earned her respect from both the public and fellow royals. However, recent months had brought unexpected tensions to the palace. Charis had begun questioning certain traditional protocols that she felt were outdated and potentially harmful to the monarchy's public image. Her suggestions for modernizing royal engagement with social media, her advocacy for more progressive charitable causes, and her outspoken support for environmental initiatives had not sat well with some senior members of the royal household. What started as minor disagreements in private meetings had gradually escalated into more serious confrontations. The final straw came during a heated discussion about the royal family's response to recent social justice movements. Charis had passionately argued for a more vocal stance on equality issues, while traditionalists within the palace hierarchy believed the monarchy should maintain its historical position of political neutrality. The debate had grown intense, with voices raised and positions becoming increasingly entrenched. Camilla, as Queen Consort, found herself caught between supporting progressive change and maintaining the stability that the institution required. Behind closed doors, palace advisors had been whispering concerns about Charis's growing influence, particularly among younger royals who seemed drawn to her modern approach. Some worried that her ideas could fracture the carefully maintained unity of the royal family. Others feared that her increasing popularity with the public might overshadow other family members, creating an unwelcome shift in the traditional hierarchy of royal attention and respect. The decision to remove Charis from the official registry had not been made lightly. Hours of deliberation in private chambers, consultations with constitutional experts, and lengthy discussions with King Charles had preceded this moment. The registry, which documented all official members of the royal family and their roles within the monarchy, was considered sacred ground. Removal from this document effectively meant exclusion from official royal duties, stripping away titles, privileges, and the formal recognition that came with royal status. As Camilla approached the registry office, she reflected on the conversations that had led to this point. The king had expressed his reluctance, understanding the potential consequences of such an action. However, the mounting pressure from senior courtiers and the perceived need to maintain institutional stability had ultimately swayed the decision. The Queen Consort had volunteered to personally oversee the removal, believing that her involvement would demonstrate the seriousness of the situation while also taking responsibility for what many would view as a harsh punishment. The registry keeper, an elderly man who had served the royal family for nearly 4 decades, looked up with surprise as Camilla entered his domain unannounced. The registry office was typically a quiet sanctuary where few people ventured, filled with ancient books, official seals, and the weight of centuries of royal documentation. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he realized the significance of the Queen Consort's unexpected presence in his carefully organized world of royal records. Camilla's voice was steady, but carried an undertone of regret as she explained the purpose of her visit. The registry keeper listened in stunned silence, his eyes widening as he comprehended the magnitude of what was being requested. Never in his long career had he witnessed such a dramatic removal of a family member from the official records. The process itself was technical but symbolic, requiring specific procedures and official seals that would make the decision legally binding and irreversible. With careful precision, the keeper located Princess Charis's entry in a massive leather-bound registry. Her name appeared in elegant calligraphy, surrounded by official stamps and signatures that had marked her formal inclusion into the royal family years earlier. The irony was not lost on either of them that removing her name would take only minutes, while building her position and reputation within the family had taken years of dedicated service and genuine commitment to royal duties. As the keeper prepared the necessary documentation for the removal, Camilla stood silently at the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens. She watched gardeners tending to the rose bushes that Charis had personally helped plant during a community initiative the previous spring. The memory brought a pang of uncertainty about whether they were making the right choice, but the decision had already been set in motion by forces beyond any single person's control. The removal process required multiple signatures and official witnesses, ensuring that such significant actions could never be taken hastily or without proper documentation. Each signature fell heavier than the last, as both Camilla and the registry keeper understood they were participating in something that would have lasting consequences far beyond the confines of their quiet office. The weight of tradition and the demands of institutional preservation had collided with personal relationships and individual convictions. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Prince William was conducting his morning briefings with private secretaries, completely unaware of the historic action taking place just floors below. His daily routine typically included reviewing upcoming engagements, discussing charitable initiatives, and coordinating with various organizations that relied on royal patronage. The morning had begun like any other, with discussions about environmental projects and plans for upcoming Commonwealth visits that would strengthen diplomatic relationships across the globe. As the final signatures were applied to the registry documents, Camilla felt the full weight of what had just transpired. Princess Charis was no longer officially recognized as a member of the royal family. Her name struck from the records that defined royal legitimacy and institutional belonging. The decision had been made with the intention of preserving stability, but both she and the registry keeper understood that the consequences would likely create the very turmoil they had hoped to avoid. The news of Charis's removal would need to be communicated carefully to other family members, starting with those most closely affected by the decision. William, as second in line to the throne, and someone who had developed a close working relationship with Charis on various charitable endeavors, would need to be informed immediately. His reaction was expected to be intense, given his known appreciation for Charis's dedication and his general support for modernizing certain aspects of royal protocol. The palace communication strategy had already been planned in anticipation of potential backlash from both family members and the public. Press secretaries had prepared statements that would frame the decision as a mutual agreement based on differing visions for royal service, though everyone involved knew the reality was far more complex and contentious than any public statement could convey. As Camilla left the registry office, she carried with her not only the satisfaction of having completed a difficult but necessary task, but also the heavy burden of knowing that relationships within the royal family would never be quite the same. The institutional demands of monarchy had once again taken precedence over personal preferences and individual relationships, continuing a pattern that had defined royal life for centuries. The quiet corridors of the palace would soon echo with heated discussions, difficult conversations, and the kind of family tensions that reminded everyone involved that being royal meant living under constant scrutiny while navigating the complex balance between personal desires and institutional obligations. The removal of Charis's name from the registry was complete, but the story of its consequences was just beginning to unfold. The news reached Prince William through his private secretary during what should have been a routine morning meeting about upcoming charitable engagements. The young aide's face had gone pale as he received the phone call from the registry office, and William immediately sensed something serious had occurred. When a secretary whispered the details of what had transpired just an hour earlier, William's reaction was immediate and explosive. His coffee cup crashed to the floor as he stood abruptly, the fine china shattering across the Persian carpet in his private study. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot, causing his staff to freeze in stunned silence. Never in their years of service had they witnessed such an outburst from the typically composed future king. His face flushed red with anger as the full implications of Camilla's actions began to sink in. She did what? William's voice carried a dangerous edge that his staff had never heard before. The room fell completely silent as everyone present realized they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered and whispered about in palace corridors for years to come. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he processed the betrayal he felt from someone he had begun to trust and respect as a senior member of the family. The private secretary, a seasoned palace veteran who had weathered many royal storms, had never seen William lose his composure so completely. He watched nervously as the prince began pacing the length of his study, muttering under his breath about respect, consultation, and the proper channels that should have been followed for such a momentous decision. The breaking of protocol was almost as infuriating to William as the action itself. Princess Charis had become more than just a family member to William over the years. She had proven herself to be a dedicated royal who genuinely cared about making a positive impact through her charitable work. Her fresh perspectives on environmental issues had influenced several of his own initiatives, and her ability to connect with younger generations had made her an invaluable asset to the monarchy's future. Her removal felt not just personal, but strategically damaging to everything he was trying to build for the future of the royal family. The prince's mind raced through the implications of what had just occurred. Public relations would be a nightmare, with media outlets certainly picking up on the story within hours. The Commonwealth nations that had grown fond of Charis would demand explanations. Charitable organizations that had partnered with her would face uncertainty about their ongoing relationships with the royal family. Most personally painful, however, was the realization that major family decisions were being made without his knowledge or input. William immediately demanded a private audience with his father, King Charles, but was informed that His Majesty was in meetings with government officials and could not be disturbed until late afternoon. This delay only intensified his frustration, as he felt the situation required immediate attention and resolution. The fact that such a significant family matter had been handled while he was excluded from the decision-making process violated his understanding of how the modern monarchy should function. His staff watched nervously as he placed call after call, trying to reach other family members who might have additional information about the circumstances surrounding Charis's removal. Each conversation revealed that the decision had been made by a very small circle of senior royals and advisors, with most family members learning about it only after the fact. This revelation deepened his sense of betrayal and exclusion from what he considered essential family business. The morning's scheduled engagements had to be quietly postponed as William struggled to regain his composure. His private secretary worked frantically to reschedule meetings with various charitable organizations, offering vague explanations about urgent family matters that required the prince's immediate attention. The palace machinery smoothly shifted into crisis management mode, with staff members sworn to absolute secrecy about what they had witnessed in the prince's study. Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, arrived at the palace shortly after receiving William's urgent phone call. Her calm presence provided some stability as William vented his frustrations about what he saw as a complete breakdown in family communication and respect. She had also developed a close working relationship with Charis, particularly around early childhood development initiatives, and shared William's shock at the sudden and dramatic action taken against someone they both respected. As the day progressed, more details emerged about the events leading up to Charis's removal from the registry. William learned about the heated discussions that had taken place behind closed doors, the growing concerns among traditional courtiers about her progressive influence, and the mounting pressure that had ultimately led to the decision to exclude her from official royal status. Each new piece of information only increased his anger at being kept in the dark about such important family dynamics. The prince's frustration extended beyond the immediate decision to broader questions about how the monarchy was being managed. He had spent years working to modernize the royal family's approach to public service, believing that adaptation and evolution were essential for the institution's survival and relevance. Charis's removal felt like a step backward toward the kind of rigid traditionalism that he feared would alienate younger generations and diminish the monarchy's future influence. By midday, William had composed a strongly worded letter to be delivered immediately to Camilla, expressing his displeasure at her actions and demanding a full explanation of the circumstances that had led to such a drastic decision. The letter, written in formal language but carrying an unmistakable tone of royal displeasure, requested an immediate private meeting to discuss what he termed this unacceptable breach of family protocol and consultation. The palace's internal communication systems buzzed with tension as news of William's reaction spread among senior staff members. Everyone understood that a major confrontation was brewing between two of the most influential figures in the royal hierarchy. The queen consort's actions had been taken with the authority of her position, but the future king's anger represented a challenge to that authority that could not be ignored or dismissed. Camilla's own staff began preparing for what they anticipated would be a difficult conversation with William. They gathered documentation about the decision-making process, the concerns that had been raised about Charis's behavior, and the consultations that had taken place with King Charles before the action was taken. However, they also knew that no amount of justification would likely satisfy William's anger at being excluded from such a significant family decision. The tension within the palace became palpable as both sides prepared for their confrontation. Staff members found themselves choosing sides, with younger palace employees generally sympathetic to William's position, while more senior courtiers supported Camilla's actions as necessary for institutional stability. The divide reflected broader generational differences within the royal household about how the monarchy should adapt to modern expectations. Meanwhile, Princess Charis remained unaware of the morning's events, having left early for a private engagement in the countryside. Her phone had been turned off during a meeting with environmental activists, leaving her completely oblivious to the fact that her royal status had been officially revoked while she was discussing conservation initiatives. The irony of her dedication to royal duties, continuing even as her position was being eliminated, was not lost on those who supported her within the palace. As afternoon approached, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the relationships and power structures within the royal family. William's anger had not diminished throughout the day. If anything, it had crystallized into a determination to ensure that such decisions would never again be made without proper consultation with senior family members who would be affected by the consequences. The private meeting between William and Camilla was scheduled for late afternoon, after King Charles completed his government consultations. Palace staff prepared the blue drawing room for what everyone understood would be a difficult and potentially explosive conversation between two strong-willed individuals who represented different visions for how the royal family should operate in a modern era. The clash between tradition and modernization, between institutional preservation and family unity, was about to reach a critical moment that would define relationships within the royal household for years to come. Everyone involved understood that the outcome of this confrontation would determine not just the fate of Princess Charis, but the future dynamics of power and decision-making within the British monarchy. The Blue Drawing Room had witnessed many historic confrontations throughout its centuries of service to the British monarchy, but few had carried the personal intensity and institutional significance of the meeting that took place that late afternoon. William arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, his usual punctuality now carrying an edge of barely controlled anger. His formal morning attire had been replaced by a dark suit that seemed to reflect his somber mood, and his typically warm demeanor had been replaced by the cold formality of royal displeasure. Camilla entered the room moments later, accompanied by her private secretary, who carried a folder of documents related to the morning's events. Her composure remained intact, but those who knew her well could detect the slight tension in her movements that betrayed her awareness of the storm she was about to face. The queen consort had dealt with many difficult situations throughout her years in royal life, but confronting the future king over a decision she had made unilaterally was uncharted territory. The conversation began with the stiff formality that marked serious royal business, but quickly escalated as William's frustration boiled over. His voice, normally measured and diplomatic, carried a sharpness that echoed off the ornate walls as he demanded explanations for what he considered a betrayal of family unity and proper protocol. The removal of Charis, he argued, had been handled in exactly the kind of secretive, heavy-handed manner that modern monarchies needed to avoid. Camilla's response revealed the depth of concerns that had led to her decision. She spoke about late-night meetings where senior courtiers had expressed growing alarm about Charis's influence on younger royals, about traditional supporters of the monarchy who had threatened to withdraw their backing if what they saw as radical changes continued unchecked, and about constitutional experts who had warned that certain of Charis's proposals could put the monarchy in conflict with its traditional role as a unifying, politically neutral institution. The argument intensified as William challenged every justification that Camilla offered. He pointed out that Charis's progressive ideas were exactly what the monarchy needed to remain relevant to younger generations who would determine its future survival. Her charitable work had brought positive attention to causes that mattered to modern society, and her ability to connect with diverse communities had strengthened the royal family's relationship with a changing Commonwealth population. "You've destroyed someone who is actually helping us evolve," William stated with controlled fury, his hands gripping the back of a gilded chair. "While you're worried about offending traditionalists who will support us regardless, you've alienated exactly the people we need to win over for the future." His words carried the weight of someone who understood that his generation would inherit the consequences of decisions being made today. The queen consort countered that institutional stability had to take precedence over individual preferences, no matter how well-intentioned. She had witnessed firsthand how quickly public opinion could turn against the royal family when they appeared to overstep traditional boundaries, and she believed that preserving the monarchy's core identity was more important than adapting to every changing social trend. Her experience had taught her that survival sometimes required difficult choices that prioritized long-term institutional health over short-term popularity. As their debate continued, it became clear that this confrontation represented more than just disagreement about Princess Charis. They were arguing about the fundamental direction of the monarchy itself, whether it should embrace change to remain relevant or maintain traditional approaches to preserve its unique constitutional role. The personal had become political, and the political had become deeply personal. William's anger reached its peak when he learned that King Charles had been consulted about the decision, but had chosen not to inform his son before the action was taken. The future king felt betrayed not just by Camilla, but by his own father's willingness to exclude him from such significant family business. This revelation transformed his anger from focused displeasure into a broader questioning of his role and influence within the royal hierarchy. "If this is how major decisions are made," William declared, his voice dangerously quiet, "then perhaps we need to reconsider how this family operates. I won't be excluded from decisions that affect the institution I'll someday lead." The implicit threat in his words was clear to everyone present. The future king was prepared to challenge the current power structure if necessary to ensure his voice was heard. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of King Charles himself, who had been informed by nervous staff that the argument between his wife and heir was escalating beyond manageable levels. His presence immediately shifted the dynamics in the room, as both William and Camilla were forced to moderate their tone and approach in deference to the sovereign. However, the underlying tensions remained as explosive as before. Charles listened carefully as both sides presented their positions, his weathered face revealing the strain of mediating between two people he cared about deeply. The king found himself caught between his wife's concerns about institutional stability and his son's vision for monarchical modernization. His own experiences with family conflict and public scrutiny had taught him that both perspectives contained essential truths that could not be easily reconciled. The discussion that followed was painful but necessary, as 3 generations of royal leadership grappled with questions that had no easy answers. How much change was too much? How could tradition be preserved while allowing evolution? Who had the authority to make decisions that affected the entire family? And what consultation processes should be required for actions of such magnitude? Princess Charis finally learned of her changed status when she returned to the palace that evening, expecting to attend a dinner with visiting dignitaries. Her shock was evident as palace staff awkwardly informed her that she would no longer be included in official royal events. The woman who had dedicated years of her life to royal service discovered that her position had been eliminated while she was attending to the very charitable work that had defined her royal identity. Her reaction was one of dignified bewilderment rather than anger. She requested a private meeting with King Charles to understand the reasoning behind her removal and to ensure that her ongoing charitable commitments could be transitioned smoothly to avoid disrupting the organizations that depended on royal patronage. Even in her moment of personal crisis, her primary concern remained the welfare of the causes she had supported. The king granted her request immediately, recognizing that she deserved an explanation and the opportunity to conclude her royal duties with dignity. Their conversation, held in his private study, surrounded by centuries of royal portraits, was marked by mutual respect and genuine sadness about circumstances that had spiraled beyond anyone's initial intentions. Charis accepted her removal with grace that impressed even her critics, but she also made clear that she believed the monarchy was making a mistake by rejecting progressive voices that could help bridge the growing gap between royal tradition and modern expectations. Her final words to the king were prophetic. "The institution may survive by excluding people like me, but it will not thrive." The immediate aftermath of these events revealed the complex consequences of what had initially seemed like a straightforward administrative action. Media outlets quickly picked up on Charis's sudden absence from royal events, leading to speculation that created exactly the kind of negative publicity that the original decision had been intended to avoid. Public reaction was sharply divided, with younger demographics expressing outrage at what they perceived as the silencing of a progressive voice, while traditionalists applauded the preservation of royal standards. Within the palace, relationships remained strained as family members processed the implications of what had occurred. William's anger had not disappeared, though it had been channeled into a determination to ensure greater transparency and consultation in future family decisions. His relationship with Camilla would require careful rebuilding, as trust once broken was not easily restored within the formal constraints of royal protocol. The broader royal household also felt the aftershocks of the confrontation. Staff members who had supported Charis found themselves questioning their own positions, while those who had advocated for her removal worried about potential retaliation from William when he eventually became king. The careful balance of relationships and loyalties that kept the palace functioning smoothly had been disrupted in ways that would take months or even years to fully resolve. King Charles implemented new protocols requiring consultation with senior family members before any actions that significantly affected royal status or duties. These changes represented a victory for William's position about transparency and collective decision-making, but they came at the cost of family harmony and institutional confidence that would be difficult to restore. Princess Charis eventually established her own charitable foundation, continuing the work that had defined her royal years, but now free from the constraints of royal protocol. Her success in this independent role only highlighted what the monarchy had lost by choosing institutional preservation over progressive engagement with modern society. The events of that day became a turning point in royal family dynamics, establishing new precedents for decision-making while also revealing the fundamental tensions between tradition and change that would continue to challenge the monarchy in an evolving world. The removal of Charis's name from the registry had taken only minutes, but its consequences would reshape royal relationships and institutional approaches for generations to come.